Hello everyone, my name is Mark Halsey. I'm here with Fiona Halsey and we are Halsey Legal Services. This presentation is part of a three-part presentation. It is relating to the 6-monthly update that we do on AFCA cases as they relate to life insurance. Today's presentation, or this presentation, is about trauma or critical illness insurance, and what we're looking at in this particular case is a dispute relating to one of the triggers for a claim called the loss of independent existence. So Fiona, would you like to take us through the facts of this case and how the determination came about?
Sure. It's an interesting case, and it's also really helpful because if you've ever been involved in a claim for critical illness, and I might slip into calling this trauma, if you've ever been involved in a claim for that, you can be surprised at how specific the definitions are. And I expect that in most cases, claimants and policyholders probably have very little understanding of how technical the definitions are. So most people have an idea that they'll be covered for, cancer, heart attack. But I've recently worked on cases where the policyholders really did not have much an idea of how restricted their ability to claim was. So it's not an uncommon situation that occurs. So in this situation, you had the typical kind of policy where you had policy events which would have been the kind of thing you'd always think about, such as particular types of cancer, stroke, that kind of thing. But in this case, there was also an event which was a loss of independent existence. Now, in order to make a successful claim for a loss of independent existence, the policyholder had to be unable to perform at least 2 activities of daily living. Okay? And I've just noticed that I've said the policyholder, and actually it's the insured, of course, the insured person. Okay. So, I mean, often they'll be the same, but potentially they could be different. So there are 5 activities that were categorised as being the activities of daily living, and they are bathing, dressing, toileting, mobility, and feeding. And in order to satisfy the test, you had to be unable to do at least 2 of those. Now, I think it's really interesting to look at what the definitions of those, because those items are very specifically defined in the policy. Okay, and I'll just go through those because the detail on them is interesting. Okay, so in bathing, you have to have the ability to shower and bathe. Okay, now it seems to me that it doesn't say shower or bathe; it says shower and bathe. So presumably you have to be able to have a shower and a bath. Dressing, the ability to put on and take off clothing. Okay, now that's so literally to be able to put it, get it. I suppose you'd have to be able to pick it up. Okay, and then put it on. Toileting was the ability to get on and off and use the toilet. Okay, which doesn't sound particularly tricky until you've ever had a bad back, and then you realise how very difficult that can be. Mobility. Mobility is interesting. It's the ability to get in and out of bed and a chair. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but I would have thought that being able to walk, even a very small, maybe would be a different thing. Okay, but maybe this covers the ability to literally get from bed to a wheelchair. Okay, and then there's feeding. Okay. And that's defined as the ability to get food from a plate into your mouth. Okay, so it's not relevant as to whether or not you can put toast in the toaster, but if somebody puts the food directly in front of you, can you actually get it in your mouth? Okay, and that's kind of, that's quite an interesting thing as well, I think. And these definitions are surprising. Okay, I think when you really think about what they might mean. And you have to be, in order to claim, you have to be totally and irrevocably unable to do these things independently. Okay, so if you're going to be able to have a shower sometime in the future by yourself, that doesn't cut it. Okay, it's got to be forever. Okay, now this lady had neck and shoulder injuries. Okay, I think it said how she got them, but it could have been all kinds of things. And she claimed that she could not dress herself, she could not bathe, and she couldn't get out of bed. So she claimed for bathing, dressing and mobility. Now it was found that relatively, I think everyone except she probably agreed that she didn't have a mobility problem. Okay, so there was evidence given by, interestingly, for the insurer, a physio, and for the complainant, her general practitioner. And that's somewhat unusual in that in almost all of these kind of insurance cases, you actually have medical specialists on each side. So it's a bit surprising here and the physio was described as being someone who was experienced as an occupational rehabilitation consultant. So maybe they thought that meant something more. But that doesn't fit with the normal process at all. So her doctor, the GP, said that she was slow to get out of bed. She needed some time to effectively warm up, but she could do it. So that means that she wasn't totally and irrevocably unable to do it. But then the more interesting issues came about with both the question of dressing and bathing. And the surprising thing is that the physio had written a report that said that if she had special clothes that she could put on with one hand, she would be able to dress herself. So this seemed to involve wrap garments, okay, with some press studs. Okay, so that seemed like an interest. That's what they said. He said that she could do to get dressed. And with bathing, there were quite a number of suggestions. And one of those was because she was unable to use a towel, okay, to reach particular areas. And he came up with the idea that she could have a hairdryer or something similar on a stand, okay. And then, in order to wash herself, he said that she could have a sponge attached to the wall of the shower. And I assume the idea of that was that she'd rub against it, okay. And then finally, in order to wash her hair, he said she could have this long device that could reach the top of her head to shampoo her hair. And that seemed a bit surprising. Her doctor didn't agree with that assessment, okay, and noted that it would be extremely difficult for her to be able to get dressed like that.
Yeah, look, I did smirk and laugh. I do apologise for it, but I think the suggestions by the physio are disgusting, quite frankly.
I think it's disgraceful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just absurd. I mean, how could this be, I mean, the idea that somebody would have a sponge attached to the wall in the shower seemed to me extraordinary.
Well, how does she put a bra on?
Well, what you said is exactly what AFCA said. Okay, so AFCA said, and AFCA's position in respect of both bathing and dressing was actually quite similar. They're both quite similar. And basically what they said is if you have to have all these special tools to do it, then that doesn't cut it. Okay, so it's not enough. If you have to have all these very special clothes, then you don't satisfy the test of being able to independently dress yourself. And if you have to have all these strange devices in order to bathe yourself, then that doesn't cut it either. And so they were quite clear about that. But there is one maybe surprising, given what was said here, is that the complainant made a claim for non-financial loss as well. So because AFCA's got the ability to make a relatively small payment for that. And AFCA said that they weren't making an award for that because they said the case was finally balanced.
Wow.
So that's that's an assessment which I wouldn't necessarily have expected.
No.
That case was finally balanced. And but in the end, it has come out for the payment of the insured in that situation. But I feel that there are a couple of things from this which I think are interesting. And one is that there are two significant issues there, which is I think these are pretty tight definitions. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point that I thought loss of independent existence, the concept of bathing, dressing, toileting, mobility, feeding, they're pretty standard in these sort of contracts, but the definitions that are being applied by this company, this insurance company, seem extraordinary.
They seem pretty tight to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there is actually a huge difference in the category of insurance between insurers, quite clearly.
Yes, and that's something that people forget. Is people forget that insurance is all just about a contract, and it's the words of that contract, and it's the same as any other contract. Okay, it is what are the words of that contract. One of the things that concerned me about this as well is that I was also concerned about the use of this physio, because I wondered whether it was a situation where there'd been consideration of other professionals and they wouldn't give the opinion that was desired.
Yes.
But I thought that was, I thought it was certainly not what you might expect, and I was definitely surprised that you'd have a physio making a decision, giving the evidence in that, even if this person is a occupational rehab consultant, particularly because there's another recent AFCA decision where they've given the order of medical professionals and what order they'll rely on, and someone like this is pretty far down the chain in terms of they start with a specialist who is their insured person's treating specialist, so that they've seen them over a longer period of time, and gradually it moves down, and this is very much towards the bottom, but still a useful case. One thing we would say is that we've discussed this. We've decided we're not going to put the names of the insurers up on our YouTube videos, but we are also conscious that our clients are giving advice about life insurance. And so if you are one of our clients and you would like to know who the insurer is in these particular cases, you can contact us directly.
And the policy terms of their policies.
Oh, indeed. Yes. So although those can change from time to time,
of course.
But if you are one of our existing clients and you would like to have this information, please contact us. But as I said, we won't be putting it on YouTube.
No.
We do have other videos in this series, but this is the end of this one. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.